Okay. Okay. All right, so let's get started, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. We are excited to have you and to be talking about the Equity Toolkit. My name is Jessica Leclerc. I'm Senior Program Director with Sustainable CT, and I am actually going to just get right into it and share a screen. Okay. And I'm at the last slide, so you're getting a sneak peek of what's to come, but we'll start at the beginning. All right, so we're here today. This is our second installment of our Pathway to Gold webinar series. And this morning, we're going to be talking about Action 1.1, Optimize for Equity. Okay, so we've got two guest speakers to share this morning. An equity coach, Ace Ricker, and Sarah Larson, the Deputy Superintendent from the Department of Parks, Recreation, Youth, and Community Services from the City of Bristol. So I'm going to go through very quickly because we want to hear from them, but I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Pathway to Goal webinar series, and then some of the requirements specifically for Action 1.1 and some of the supports available to you as a town. Okay, so as I said, this is our second webinar of our Pathway to Goal webinar series. We had one already on Action 8.6, collaborate with other municipalities on sustainability actions. If you want, we have a recording available on our website and we can share that with you. We do have some topics coming up. Dates are TBD, but we'll be talking about how to develop and adopt a statement on equity. We'll be talking about our climate leader designation, and then strategies to get to the point threshold required for gold certification, which is 750 points. So all these things are coming up. They'll be maybe monthly. We might have a little bigger gap between this webinar and the next one, but stay tuned for some dates. Okay. Oops. So to ground you in why we're doing those specific webinars, they are all tied to the requirements for gold certification. You can see all actions in category 1, which is entitled Inclusive and Equitable Communities are required. Specifically for Action 1.1, Optimize for Equity, you must complete 4 equity toolkits. And I'll walk you through the equity toolkit process in just a few slides. You also have to do 1 action in each of our 12 categories. This is standard for bronze and silver certification as well. Achieve the climate leader designation, complete our regional collaboration action 8.6 and get to 750 points. I'm not going to go into detail on these requirements, but we can definitely do that during the Q&A portion of today's session. So if you have questions, we can definitely walk through them on these other requirements for gold. This is our second year of offering gold certification. Last year was our very first. New Haven achieved gold. We're very proud of them. They did amazing work, and we're excited to see what communities join New Haven in 2024. So why does equity matter? Sustainable CT believes that our communities can thrive and truly be sustainable only when social equity is achieved, that people's race, gender, zip code, etc. does not dictate their life outcome. More specifically, more deeply equitable communities recognize the intrinsic value of each member and the need to connect with everyone, regardless of a person's race, gender, age, or sexual identity. So we're going to get to the toolkit now. Just for nomenclature, we call Action 1.1 Optimize for Equity, but we loosely also refer to it as the Equity Toolkit. In Action 1.1, we ask towns to look at a process of intentional inclusion and co-creation that is outlined within the Equity Toolkit as they're doing any other action in our program. So that's why we call it the Equity Toolkit. Basically, this is a lens. It's a way to work on another action, and we're going to ask you what you did. We want to know about the process. That's really important. We're looking at what you did and how you did it, and the outcome is the outcome. We're not going to judge you on the outcome, but we're going to look at specifically the steps you took to get there. So before we dig into the different steps, very broadly, again, the Equity Toolkit is asking a town to connect with people who aren't usually at the decision-making table in their community, folks who aren't able to come to the maybe standard 7 p.m. every other Tuesday town council meeting that you might have as a community, or they're not able to participate on a committee or commission of a town that meets monthly, those obligations, those meetings can be challenging for some to attend. It doesn't mean that people don't have input and want to share their wants and needs as a community member. So the equity toolkit is really asking you to think creatively about who lives in your community. How can you connect with them and meet them where they're at? Are people congregating in certain areas of a town? Are people going to certain stores? Are there events that everybody goes to in a town? Are there ways to reach out, connect with people, and just have a conversation? What would make their life a little bit better in their city or town? What could you do to improve that? And there's no right or wrong answer. It's just what you've heard. So when we're working with towns on the equity toolkit, we walk them through in the equity toolkit document all of the steps that you would take. And it's a pretty long document, but there are lots of fun graphics like what you see on the slide. So hopefully it's not too burdensome to read through. But the bread and butter of what we're looking for your submission is on page 13 of the equity toolkit. And on this page, we lay out 5 questions, and we're looking for specific answers to these questions. And if you answer those questions, it's really going to tell us the process of what you did to, how you use the toolkit. So the very first question we're going to ask you is, who lives and works in your community? Specifically, list the groups and stakeholders in town. And there are lots of resources available to you already from other organizations like the Partnership for Strong Communities, Connecticut CIRC. There are organizations that collect data on who lives in municipalities, and you can use that. You can copy and paste it right into your equity toolkit. But it's a great opportunity to really do a deep dive. What are the different kinds of people in your town, looking at race, ethnicity, age, income level of people, homeowners versus renters, people who might be with a family or without a family. So what are the different kinds of people that are living in your town? There's no right or wrong answer. We're just asking you to look broadly at who's in your town. The next step we're going to ask you to tell us about is how you connected with these different types of people in your town. And there are many ways you might connect with folks. Again, meeting people where they're at seems to be the most effective. Maybe people are attending events at the senior center. Maybe there are some after-school clubs where you can connect with young people. Maybe there are some faith-based groups that have a different population that you can connect with by reaching out to the faith-based groups. Libraries are great places to connect with folks in the town. Librarians seem to know everyone, and they have lots of different channels to connect with their patrons. There might be nonprofits in your town that are working with different clientele that maybe you can reach out and engage with and see the work that they're doing. Again, maybe there's a big event that many people in town come to, and you can table at that event, or a grocery store, or a shop that everybody goes to, and you can just sit outside that store for a day or 2 or 3, or a season. It doesn't have to be a whole season, but again, just thinking creatively about where people go, how you can connect, how you can meet them and talk to them. So we'll be specifically looking for examples. So let's just say we sat outside the town's grocery store 2 Saturdays and a Tuesday, and we were here for these certain amount of hours. Or we had a survey that was available online, but people could call in, and we put it on the town's Facebook. We had printed copies at the library. We had printed copies at the senior center, etc. We really want the specifics of how you reached out and engaged with individuals in town. The next step, we're going to ask you to tell us, what did you hear? So you're out there talking to people. Maybe you did a survey. Maybe you were sitting outside the grocery store. Maybe you went to the senior center. Maybe you tabled at an Earth Day event. When you did those things, so that combination of things, what did you hear? Again, with all of these, there's no right or wrong answer. It could be you heard people, it's a rainy day, people need umbrellas, there's no umbrellas. So you heard this thing. Okay, great. Tell us that. The next step, we're going to ask you, how did you use what you learned to shape the outcome of the other action? So to follow up on my example of umbrellas, you heard people really need umbrellas. So as a result, you're going to create an umbrella bank in town where people can come drop off unused umbrellas, pick up umbrellas. Wonderful. So that's how you're directly using what you learned. And then the fifth step is how do you think you might continue this work moving forward? Now that you've had these conversations, you've started to create some relationships in town, might you continue to move forward with this? So maybe to continue with my umbrella story, you really think that there's something here, it's getting really rainy. So you're going to talk to different people, continue to have conversations, thinking about the effectiveness of the umbrella bank with people rather than for them. And maybe you're going to, be open to explore other ways to protect people from the rain. Maybe raincoats down the road, who knows? But you're going to continue to talk with people to see how that's working, how you continue to improve. So all of this is the process of how you got there. So who lives in your town? How did you connect with each other? What did you learn from those connections? How did you use what you learned to shape an outcome? And then how might you continue these relationships down the road? So that's the process that we're hoping that you'll explain in a short narrative. This might be something you can write in a page. It might be something that takes 2 or 10. Really, the story is yours to tell, but those are the checkpoints that we look through when we're reading an Equity Toolkit response. We do have some supports available to you, and we're open to explore more supports if you think you need more. The very first thing, we want to pre-read your equity toolkits at any time. Send them right now, send them next week prior to a deadline. It's very helpful for us to do that. It oftentimes, because we're asking you to tell the process, that's not necessarily how we're wired to write. Usually, you write the outcome. In this case, we really want to know what you did to get to that outcome. So it might take a little bit of back and forth just to refine the story, and we're happy to do that with you. The next, we have equity training series coming up. We have 2 more scheduled for this year. We just wrapped up our winter series. These are 3-part, 2-hour-long sessions each, so 6 hours total of trainings that might provide some foundational knowledge that could help you feel more comfortable with the work that you're going to be doing. We have a guide available on our website. Here's the link to it. It's a PDF that lists out actions in our program that might pair rather naturally with the Equity Toolkit process. So actions that we're already asking you, the public, to do that particular activity. So if you just do a little bit more, it might satisfy the Equity Toolkit as well. So we've got a whole list of actions, and we can talk about more of those ideas today if you have any questions. You can also work with an equity coach. You can work with an equity coach at any time at no cost. Just send us an email to info@sustainablecg.org, and we'll be happy to pair you. So now that's my transition to an equity coach. We have Ace Ricker here with us today, and Ace is going to talk a little bit about some of the resources that equity coaches can provide and a little bit about the Equity Toolkit process itself.
Yeah, thank you very much. Before I share my screen, name is Ace Ricker, local to Bristol, so I'll probably run into you, Sarah. Just actually moved this way. Been working, this will be my 2nd year with Sustainable CT. I've been a public advocate and educator for the last 20 plus years through New England and across the US. And really much so as an equity coach, I very much so look at our position as a soundboard. We really want you to vocalize what those images or goals you have to build your community, to impact your community. And very much so, oftentimes there's this amazing image, but you're not really sure possibly what steps are needed to get there. And so as an equity coach, we really try to, we're the cheerleaders and motivators to really reassure you, even if you feel you can't get there, we will make sure you can. And lots of times what I really start to navigate is with the conversation, really starting off with, let's see if it works. Everyone can see the screen? Awesome, awesome. Really starting off the conversation on the intent versus impact. Now, very much so with all the different communities that you work with, really getting into it, like just said, it's really about the process. and how you navigate spaces. And us as equity coaches really kind of unearth that food for thought when navigating bringing the community together and who is actually at that table. And so, one thing that oftentimes, when looking at intent versus impact, is looking at intent, there's always this positive connections. We really want the best, and the intent there is really good and to really bring that community together. Sometimes, when doing that, our impact might not be the same as we hoped for. And so, what does that really look like? And that's where I really start off as an equity coach. And with that, who's at the table? Like, I know Jess and I say that often at the times. Like, all of us want everyone. I make an excellent Jello mold, so like for this holiday season coming up, that's like my shtick to get into. But like as community members, let's make sure that everyone gets to enjoy everyone's ideas, conversations, and part of that process. And with that, who do we already see at the table? Us as a community, very much so may see students or different able person or older, younger families. And when we see these individuals at the table, we really want to implement like what Jess had on one of those specific slides, who may not actually be at the table and why are they not at the table. So really navigating feeling welcome. One of the big things that have been echoed out has been like no childcare or the time of meetings and so forth. So these are little food for thoughts that us as equity coaches really bring into the space, because I know as different individuals having this idea and goal, and I do this very often, sometimes we're so excited and ramped up for like, we're going to start this community garden and we're going to have like the scouts do this, and like we're going to have a local like robotics club assistant like making the cute signs. Yet we are thinking about the end result instead of that process. And us as equity coaches kind of like put on the brakes a little and be like, okay, we I love this idea, I love this energy. I always navigate. I say sometimes I come into a space as a firework, and sometimes I come into a space as a sparkler. So it very much so depends on the space and how we implement that. So when we're really navigating why may they not be at the table, we really need to think about what we can do to bring them to the table. Who in the community that you may have specific needs really want to be there, like Jess was saying, who want to be there that may not be seen in there, and how we can actually access those individual voices. So lots of times looking at location. Individuals, one of the towns I worked with recently, which wasn't even a thought at first that they kind of overlooked, was depending on location specifically, is there a bus line? Lots of individuals didn't have access to the location that they were holding meetings at. And when they moved meetings, they doubled in size with a community that they reached out to. The accessibility of the buildings, the rotation of meeting times, because I wish we all had the same time so we could all enjoy the beach at points and whatnot, but there's always different availabilities. Um, Surveys. Sometimes individuals may not know how to access the area or what they could specifically assist in with the impact you're trying to do. And so we've navigated with one of the towns I've navigated is doing surveys on why we haven't been able to reach out to you and see you at the table, or why you may not be navigating a certain way. And one thing is outreach. Jess and I both love libraries. I love libraries so much. I have several friends who work within libraries across Connecticut and are very much so underutilized for how much outreach can really be there. And when really navigating some of those specifics, looking at so I can see all your charming faces again. So very much so, looking at us as equity coaches, we want to make sure that you can navigate those questions that you may not have thought about, or we're the food for thought coming into the space where we can say, hey, I've worked with Granby at this point, or I worked with Ashford, and these different communities have had this work for them. Maybe this could work for you. Or you can specifically say, I don't know really who to connect to that has a very large agricultural base, because we have a large, and we as equity coaches can really bring about some of our background of working with other community members to really assist, kind of like the breaking down the silos, as I say. Like, well, I know this town has a really good impact and has had a great model moving forward in their equity toolkit that would be excellent to really kind of collaborate with and build on. And as an equity coach, we want to kind of get through the obstacles. Like, if this was, I like, it's a rope course, and we want to be the team member to be like, no, you got this. Like, this is what could work for you on this part of the obstacle. This clearly didn't work for me. I'm still stuck at point 1 or 2, and I'm trying to figure my way around it. We want to really reassure you and motivate you that there are different ways that everyone probably in your community and in your team that you've already built have different ways of navigating it and the different ways of processing how you can reach those goals. And that's where I'm very excited, because we usually are the ones who get questions, and I'm giddy for questions all the time, to really bring that food for thought. And then it can be so serious. Jess knows I always have like the dad jokes or joke, to kind of be like, it can be a stressful time. You're worried about points. You're trying to navigate what is the next step. As an equity coach, we want you to have fun during this. We don't want this to be like, okay, we're on number 2. It's been 3 meetings. Like, we want you to really enjoy it. Whether it's me sending pictures of my fiance and I's cats in a rainbow outfit or tiger ears or whatnot, or a cute joke. We really want to motivate you, and we're here. Just like Jess get looks at the different ways that you want to implement your equity toolkit, we are here for outreach, whether we sit in on the meeting directly. I travel to sit on in person or do Zoom meetings. We really want to be that soundboard to help with the processing, and really expand in regards to that. And if you have any questions on that at the end, definitely feel free to ask, because again, I go giddy for questions. That's why I got into education work. um but I'll leave you with this before we get to before I hand it off to Sarah, is where do leprechauns send their photos to? Anyone, any ideas? So it is Instasham. So if you needed a little giddy, I know it's such a dorky one. But I will hand it off to Sarah, and we'll be happy to answer questions at the end.
Thank you, Ace and Jessica. Just get you guys going here. So I'm going to be talking today about our process in Bristol regarding the equity toolkit process. And it is a process, and it's something that we're continuously learning and getting better at, and making mistakes and learning again. So by no means is this the end all be all of equity toolkit processes, but hopefully this gives you an idea of kind of what works and has worked for us, and what we've learned and what we're doing going forward to help you in your process. So just a little bit of background. My name is Sarah Larson. I'm the Deputy Superintendent of Bristol Parks, Recreation, Youth, and Community Services. We are the Parks and Social Services Department for the City of Bristol. We manage over 760 acres of parkland, 3 public pools, hundreds of recreation programs, case management and social services for the City of Bristol, as well as arts and culture initiatives. The City of Bristol, for those of you who aren't aware, we are a city, we're a suburb of Hartford, Connecticut, located pretty much in the middle of the state, with about 60,000 residents, and about 12% of our residents do speak Spanish as their primary language. We are less diverse as a city than the state is as a whole, and definitely as the country. But we are seeing that change throughout kind of where we were in 2010 and where we are with the 2020 census and kind of where we're going. And so our goal as a community is to make sure that we're as welcoming and inclusive as possible for everybody. We're also the home of ESPN, which is probably how most people know us. So I have two case studies today. These were two of the equity toolkit processes that we had done as part of our application for gold in the fall. We did not get it, not because of our equity toolkits, I don't believe. And so we're excited to be applying again this spring for it. So the first one is for, and I apologize, I forget which actual measure this was for, but I believe is for conservation of public land. And so this is for Kern Park, which is one of our parks in Bristol. It's about a 23-acre passive parkland that was pretty active back in the 1970s. There was a lot of camps that were being held there and programs. It was a really active neighborhood park that was forested. And unfortunately, as the time went through, there was some illicit activity that had happened there that had kind of let the city abandon it. And it really just sat without any management or resources to it for a good 30 years or so until the city kind of reinstated it under the park's control in the early 2000s. And since then, there has been no resource allocation to that. It is surrounded on two sides by neighborhoods, and then to the north by a school, a community neighborhood school, and then to the south by some commercial development. And so this is it's a neighborhood park. It's not something that primarily everybody in the community is going. But there are some active neighbors who are really passionate about this park itself and had been kind of going to meetings over the years, advocating for funding to different projects, but there was never really a good plan for how we were going to use or activate any money on that park. So when the American Rescue Plan funding came along, our department advocated for about $300,000 of ARPA funds to go towards developing a master plan, as well as some initial renovations for this park. So we got that money and we went ahead and we hired our consultant, FHI Studios. And then from there, we knew that based on the history of the park, the fact that historically it had been underrepresented from allocations of resources, as well as the passion of some of the neighbors. We really wanted to make sure that they were really active in the planning process. So this took a couple different views. We worked with the assessor's office in our town to get the addresses of everybody within a mile radius who lived at that park. And we actually did direct mailings in English and Spanish to that neighborhood, inviting people to the meetings, as well as doing social media and print media advertisement for the meetings, really to make sure that people were aware of the meeting, so that people couldn't come back and go, I didn't know. We really wanted to make it very clear that we wanted them at the table, and that this was all the information that they needed. We also held the meeting at the school that was adjacent to the park. It allowed a lot of people really good access to it. So it wasn't at one of our buildings. We had to work with the school district to do it. But it allowed a lot of people to walk from their homes to the building. It was something that was a lot more convenient for people as well, especially with the fact that the park is often used by neighbors coming in and walking to it. So they were able to utilize and access the space similar to how they would access the park itself. And then we held two community outreach meetings. The first, we had about 60 participants come, and the second we had about 30. And so in the first meeting, what we did is we had them go through, and there was a lot of different poster boards where they could, and actually you can see a picture of them doing this in this slide, going through, and we asked them a whole bunch of questions. How do they historically use this park? How often do you visit this park? What would increase your visitation to the park? Questions in regards to how would they want to see the money spent? questions in regards to where do they enter the park? Do they want parking or do they not want parking for the park? So there was a lot of engagement in this. I could have put a picture where there was a little kid who was engaging in this. And so what we had done is we had worked with our engineering architectural team to then collate all this data and bring it back into a first draft of a master plan. And then that was what we had presented at our second meeting, where we had then gotten community feedback. So that was this corner right here. You can see that initial master plan that has put together. And then from there, we presented that to them. So we talk to them about the different components of that. And we got a lot of feedback. Some of it was positive and some of it was negative. They were concerned about some of the fences that we had proposed being removed. So that was something that we had then removed. You can see here, there's an H here for the fencing removal here. If you look over here, that's not part of that secondary plan. So there was a lot of things that they had talked about. And they gave us their feedback. And some of it was stuff we wanted to hear and some of it was stuff we didn't want to hear, but ultimately they are the people who are most often using the park. It's ultimately their space as a public space, and we're helping steward that. So what we got out of that second meeting is we got a revised master plan of where we wanted the park to go. And then we also had them prioritize with knowing how much money we had to allocate to the project and knowing how much money each feature of the master plan would approximately cost, what they wanted to prioritize as their phase one approach. And so from there, we were able to focus on kind of this plan down here, which is our construction document for the renovation. And that really included removing the dilapidated and blighted tennis courts and replacing that with an infiltrated wildlife and wildflower garden, really redoing the trail system, as well as a formalized entrance at Primrose. And so we were able to kind of put together these phase one priorities that we have then gone out to construction with. So that's a little bit about the Kern Park project. I'm going to go to another one, and then at the end, I'm going to just talk about a little bit of what we've learned and where we're going to now. So our other case study that we're going to look at of our equity toolkit is our Martin Luther King Jr. mural. And this one, I believe, was for the Arts and Culture Initiative section within Sustainable CT. And so this was created, this is part of the Rise Up CT Martin Luther King Jr. mural tour. And so the idea is that there'd be 39 murals across Connecticut communities representing the 39 years of Martin Luther King Jr.'s life and representing his vision. This was a project that a number of our community members had seen when Southington, which is a neighboring town to us, got that mural and was brought to our Arts and Culture Commission, which our department oversees, as an idea that they wanted to implement as one of their initiatives for 2022. The board was in favor of it. And once we got approval with Rise Up and got on the list of something that we wanted to implement, we actually put together a steering committee of community members to really guide this process. And we were really intentional with the steering committee that it was not just the members of our Arts and Culture Commission, it was not just members from our department working with the artists. We really wanted to make sure that different sections of our community were represented. So this was a 12-person steering committee, and we had representatives from the Bristol Boys and Girls Club, the city, different just residents who were interested in this, the NAACP in the community, and other community groups. And one of the things that we had done is that out of the 12 members of the steering committee, 9 members identified as people of color. And this was something that we were really intentional about, despite the fact that it doesn't represent Bristol's diversity of population. We really wanted to make sure that the people who were guiding this project and were guiding the design, despite being historically disenfranchised within the community for a number of reasons and unbeing able to tell their stories a lot of times, really were the guiding force in directing what this mural meant for our community and what this mural meant for them. And so we really wanted them in the driver's seat and putting them in charge. So the steering committee from there was working with the artists. They put together a community survey. This was shared on social media. There were print versions of this, and this was sent out to the community in general to ask people what they wanted to see in the mural. And we got things back from our first female mayor in Bristol, to President Obama, to Vice President Harris, as well as other features, one of which was Barbara Hudson, who is a local, or was a local art historian who curated African-American and Black art in the United States, to the point where she was actually the first African-American curator to curate for the White House with Jimmy Carter. And so she has a really varied and exciting career and impactful career, both in Bristol and at the state, as well as nationally, that people really wanted to highlight, especially from an art project. So what we had done is they had gone ahead and we had put together with the artists, the steering committee, took the community surveys, worked with the artists to create a design. And you can see that design on the left. So it featured Barbara Hudson, that's on the, she was on the left, the Dalai Lama in the middle. For his peace activism, but also his connection, his love of clocks and timepieces, which Bristol is known for as well. And then Maya Angelou, activist and poet on the right. And so we, the steering committee, went ahead and put this design from the artist out to the community to get their feedback. And one of the things that we got a lot of feedback on was that people really wanted MLK on their MLK mural. And that sounds like that makes sense. But if you look at some of the murals for MLK across the state, he's not in every single one of them. And there was no kind of guide that he had to be in it. But people in Bristol were really passionate that MLK was going to be featured on it. So we took that feedback, the artists took that feedback, the steering committee took that feedback, and redesigned it. And what you see on the right here is the final mural featuring MLK, Maya Angelou, and Bristol resident Barbara Hudson. And so this really was a testament to what the community wanted featured on their Inspiring Hope mural. As a testament of this, we were supposed to be getting some sustainable CT funding for this project. They had run out of funding. And so the entire $15,000 for this mural to pay for it was entirely raised by community members. And so their buy-in in the process and their participation in the process helped to create that buy-in that led to them kind of adopting this mural and being willing to part with funds and their discretionary income, especially right after COVID when money is tight, to fund this as a testament to the Bristol community. So we're really proud of that. And that featured, we had a mural unveiling, which you can see here, and a huge block party where we had hundreds of community members come out to kind of celebrate the addition of this mural. So from there, what have we learned? The processes aren't always smooth. And while it seems like, okay, the outcomes are great in both of these cases, there's bumps in the road. We learned a lot about the disenfranchisement of Bristol residents, whether that is neighbors with a community park that hasn't been allocated resources in 40 plus years, and who were very concerned and actually advocated that they didn't want any funding if it wasn't going to be maintained. And they would rather not have any money or any work done on the park if it wasn't going to be upkept over the years. And there was a lot of distrust for the city and city employees in the city department who had abandoned this land. And so it's a lot of working to build trust, to kind of move past that acknowledging the past and what has been done and moving forward to build that trust going forward, as well as the disenfranchisement of lots of minority groups within the city, whether that is the African American community who has suffered segregation and poll tax, and a number of other inequities, redlining, gentrification, and who weren't ever at the table historically to make decisions, and making sure that they were at the table to guide their own future and how they wanted to tell their own story, as well as representation. So we were really proud of our steering committee and what we were able to do with that, and having such a significant presence of African Americans and Black members of our community on that steering committee in order to do it. But one of the things that we didn't do, and obviously this was an MLK mural, but it didn't have to be specifically focused on our African American community members. And we do have a much larger Latino population and Hispanic population in Bristol than we do African American, and they weren't really represented in that mural itself. And so going forward, how do we make sure that the mural is great and speaks to members of our community, but how do we make sure that our Hispanic and Latino residents have the opportunity to tell their story as well, whether that is making sure that we're offering advertisement and translations in Spanish at our meetings or at our different events, as well as making sure that there are opportunities for bringing them to the table. And then also making sure that we have active listening followed by action, so that we're actively engaging and listening to the concerns of our community members, whether that's that they're turning down they want to turn down $300,000 worth of improvements to their neighborhood park, and what those concerns are and their fears about the history of forest fires in that park, as well as concerns regarding just it going and people not doing upkeep and management, as well as the direct action to follow to build that trust. Because the words and saying that, yes, we are going to make sure we're upkeeping the park are not enough. We need to make sure that we're putting actions to those words to build that trust. So going in there and making sure they're seeing us doing maintenance, being responsive to their phone calls when they share concerns, making sure that we have plans for that upkeep and that management going forward. And that's just a very brief overview of what we learned. We've learned a lot from this process and we're getting better. And we're also using our successes to kind of guide our equity process today and tomorrow. So we have gone out for renovations for Kern Park. Our phase 1 is almost completed and we're going to open that this summer, hopefully. But that hasn't been a smooth process. We had to take down 2 trees that were indicated as part of the priority in the master plan that were hazards. And we had residents that were absolutely distraught that those 2 trees came down, and they were calling our office and coming to our board meetings. And we have to listen and actively engage with them and understand their concerns. The benefit, though, of having this extensive community engagement process is that we're able to rely on that to make our decisions going forward, and how we're going to respond to these situations. So these community engagement processes are also resources for our department and for our community in order to do the work that we're doing. The mural led to the first Juneteenth celebration that was held in Bristol last year, and it's going for the 2nd annual this year. And so we're really excited that we were able to spark this initiative and bring people together in a way that was inspiring, especially when Bristol has had white supremacist threats recently. And that this mural really served as a beacon of hope to the community to rally behind during that really difficult time. We've also been able to leverage the relationships that we've built as part of this equity process in order to engage in other initiatives. So as some of you may know, we're coming up on the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence in the next 2 years. The state and the nation and municipalities are putting together how they're going to celebrate for it. And our Bristol 250 committee, we've been able to utilize the relationships that we've made as part of the steering committee with the MLK Junior Mural process in order to make sure that the people at the table for those planning celebrations are also diverse and represent our entire community, and that we don't just have a bunch of for lack of better words, white people talking about the white history of the United States in 1776 and not recognizing the diverse and critical contributions and the injustices done to other populations, such as the enslavement of African Americans and the displacement of Indigenous peoples at that time. And so what does that really look like? The history of Bristol and the history of America since 1776, and making sure everybody's at the table to tell those stories. We've also utilized this community engagement for our Upgrade Your Play campaign. So this is putting out to the community and letting them decide kind of as we upgrade our playgrounds, what designs, what playground they actually want to see into the community. And we've gotten feedback from that there were concerns that even though we were picking accessible playground equipment to give them as options, that it still wasn't enough. And so we've engaged from there, listening to the stories of some of our community members, engaged in surveys, specifically partnering with our schools to our special ed students and their families, of hearing from them what playground equipment do they need, how can our parks be more and playgrounds be more accessible, what it's going to make them stay, or why do they like to go to playgrounds, so that we can incorporate their feedback into the design and implementation of our future playgrounds, to make sure that their voices are heard as well. And then the other thing is we're working on currently a grant for developing forest management plans in Bristol. We have about 760 acres of parkland, about half of that is forested. And how are we going to steward that land? And one of the things that we really want to do if we get this grant and are able to put together forest management plans is we want to be able to do neighborhood engagement meetings where we're asking the residents, what do they need from their forests and their trees? And is that food? Do they need food forests? Do they want it managed for conservation purposes and ecology? Do they want it managed for flood and climate mitigation? And one of the things that we're really excited about is we're going to utilize our recreation division to actually provide childcare at these events, so that people can come regardless of kind of their childcare situation and participate in their engagement and how we're going to manage our forests in Bristol going forward. So again, I went over a lot. I think I extended my time that I was supposed to, but this is just a very brief overview of kind of what we did in Bristol. And if it works and can help inspire you, absolutely. But again, we're not the only end all be all for how this works. And I think we're going to turn over to questions, but if anyone has any questions and want to contact me offline, this is my contact information as well. So with that, sorry, Jessica, I'm pretty sure I went over, but.
No apologies needed. Thank you so much, Sarah and Ace, for sharing out. Wonderful, lots of information. So turn it over to the audience now. What questions do you have? What are you wondering? Feel free to use the chat or just come off mute.
Well, I had a general question because we're going for recertification, and we keep track in that spreadsheet that you used to have, but the only one I can find online is from 2022. So is there a one for this year?
So we have our action overview worksheet, which is on our actions. If you click on the action page where they have all the drop-down menus, at the very top bit, there's a bunch of text and there it is, Kate is on it. That's the link. So that would be updated. And then we also have a tracker document for towns seeking gold certification, and maybe Kate could put that in as well. That is specific to the gold requirements, but it's on the website, and we can share that with you too, Mary.
Okay, well, you should update the FAQ page because it points to the 2022.
Oh yeah, thank you for that.
And then the other question I have is, we're thinking we would like to host equity training so that we can get more people in town to like you were saying, having the event closer to people and making it more possible to get there. So if we have that, then we don't have to send people to training as well, right? That would qualify
Right.
and
Yep.
okay.
So
Um,
yeah, so one of the requirements for goal for the rest of the group is to complete action 1.2, which is either attend or host an equity training. So 1.2.2 is hosting the equity training, and that would certainly count.